Our next session title is Employee Engagement in a VUCA World. And moderator is Mr. Leon Menezes. He is the professor of practice at Institute of Business Administration. The panelists are Mr. Asad-Said Jafar, Chairman and CEO of Philips Pakistan Limited, Mr. Amir Iqbal, Managing Director and CEO of Bayer Pakistan and Country Manager, Bayer CropScience, Mr. Sohail P. Ahmed, the Advisor to Chairman, House of Habib, Ms. Carol J. Ariano, Vice President Human Resources, Khan University Hospital, Ms. Fatima Asad-Said, Regional Director, Human Capital Excellence, AbacusConsulting, Mr. Kamran Nasir, CEO, JS Global Capital Limited.
Good afternoon. And we'll have to apologize in advance in case there's repetition, because I think this theme has been quite hotly debated throughout the day, and lots of opinions have been expressed. But it's nice to be in the company of such a distinguished panel out here. But like many of you, and especially the panelists, I've also had a very long innings in terms of working, in terms of disruption and volatility. I have been right-sized and downsized and sanitized. I worked for a company that taught the world to fly. I worked for Pan Am, and then went bankrupt because it didn't keep up with the times. It couldn't keep up with the changing regulation. And then, of course, so many different carriers that come in. But, you know, I think the way in which we're talking about this VUCA business, and I'm getting allergic to the word now, is as if it's something new, okay? From the dawn of man, you've had this kind of volatility and change and ambiguity and all that. Maybe the pace has changed, maybe it's technology, maybe it's an interconnected world, but it's always been there. So, and if you look at some of the tools that have been around for a very long time, you know, Porter's 5 forces model has been dealing with the same thing: threat of substitution, threat of new entrants, threat of competitors. It's always been there. What has changed now that we have made it a subject of books and seminars and conferences, and that we're using it as a new buzzword? I don't know. I think, and if you look just from the last 17 years, this century is only 17 years old, you've had Y2K, you've had Arab Spring, Asian flu, economic downturn, all sorts of things have happened and will continue to happen. As we leave the door today, be prepared for something else that's going to happen to you. Today we're going to be talking about employee engagement in this new world. See, I don't want to use that word. Okay, and employee engagement, I want to explore with the panel, is, you know, I mean, what do you see as employee engagement? What is the concept to you? And how do you practice it? How are environmental assessments done to keep abreast of the changes? Because the focus of all of this is predicting the future, creating the future, reading the future, bringing out your tarot cards and seeing what it is that you can do. And then, of course, balancing the differing expectations of differing generations in your organizations. We just heard reference to the newer lot coming in, the older not giving way, the way in which we approach work, the way in which we approach learning and everything that we do. At the campus where I teach, you know, in the break there are few thousand students walking around from class to class, and everybody's walking around like this because he's looking at his mobile phone. And so this business of staring at people, winking at people is all gone because people don't look at each other anymore. So I'd like to ask the panel, and we're lucky in so many panelists today, there have only been 3 ladies, and we have 2 of them on this panel. So I'll start asking Sohail Saab out there, your concept of employee engagement, and what do you see oh, hi. You know, in terms of practice, and what is it got to do in terms of assessing the future? How do you scan the future? And what is it that you've been able to put into practice? And then we'll move down through Carol and Nasir. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. No, he let him go last. He hasn't heard the introduction.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. When we say about this VUCA, and I got this message, and I have to admit to being part of the ignorant, did not know what VUCA meant. It sounded like a Brazilian dance. I was not sure I could. So after some thought, I was going to say no. And then my secretary said, maybe it's on the Google. So I did check and felt more comforted because, hey, I said, what's new about it? It's been around. At least in Pakistan, it's abundantly around. You don't even know whether you'll reach your house in 15 minutes or 1.5 hours. So it's abundantly around in Pakistan and Karachi, a great deal. So I accepted the opportunity to be here. And thank you, Asfar, for inviting me. When people come and join and you say that they are engaged, I look upon it, how do I know that they are engaged? And I feel that they are engaged if they are driven by a purpose. Then the question is, how do you know that they are driven by a purpose? And I realized that there must be a lot of communication, both ways. Communication is not one-way street, both ways. Often, should be done often, should be done at many echelons. So you have to create a lot of formal and informal social operating mechanisms by which this would be possible. To do that, you would obviously look for you would find out some thoughts which are unsavory, and that's the wonder of it. That's the great beauty of it. You find unsavory thoughts because they are different to yours. They're not wrong. So, you cannot approach your people in a mass face. Individuals matter. So if you can remove the weeds of thought like these, address them in a sincere way, I think there'll be a lot of mutual happiness and mutual growth on both sides. And that I have found to be great help to me, and I guess it did help the others as well. I've been around a long time, as you can see. So I've had opportunity to work with different kinds of people and in very, very different environments, even East Pakistan then. So I've had this experience of seeing what people think. It's important to allow, I found it's important to allow discontent, constructive discontent, but only constructive discontent. It actually stretches the company and gives a path for growth. If you try and can that, you will never grow. You'll never even learn. There's no chance. The organization will suffer. So that constructive discontent is actually a very good thing. How do I look upon it in the future? Give me a little time, 2 minutes. I was thrilled to start a company a few years back. And as I drew the various functions and tried to make a cause and effect diagram as to what do I need, I had put on the top a company for 100 years. And as I tried to do that analysis, I came down to 2 facts. One, you need people. If you need people to do everything and anything, even technology, you need the right people. Then I had to define the right people. If you are able to attract them, how do you retain them? Then I had to define. And then I learned was the second, and actually the most important thing, is you need the right culture in the organization. How do you breed culture? is bred on values. So when I started this company, I worked with each individual on values. We identified some core values with a group of people, and then every executive that came into the company, and some left, and I would have to repeat it again, we would work on values, discuss the values in action. So I do believe that if you want engagement, you do need to get people to engage with the values, the culture, and the values thereon. I rest my case here.
Thank you. Carol?
Good afternoon. It's truly a privilege to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I build on what you said because I have the tremendous privilege of working for an organization that is highly mission, vision, values driven. And the people that I work with are equally, even more so, driven by that same purpose. The extent of alignment that there is between what individuals care about and what the organization cares about is very strong. And I think that makes all the rest of the work much easier than it might be. But when I think about what there is now, what the future looks like, what my own thoughts are about this age and stage that I'm in, several things come to mind. One is that the people we work with get to choose every day if they want to stay. And so what are we doing? Engagement is a word that's become popular, but what do we do to ensure that choice that they make every day continues to be with us? And whereas we can train managers and teach them how to do things better and try and improve their communication skills and all that, really, we need them to be curators of the work so that every individual they work with, they're thinking about what's the combination of activities that will keep that person engaged, keep them interested, and get them to choose to stay. Because if we're doing our job, they're learning enough every day to leave and join all of you. Every day they could join from my company to your company, right? They can do that. And they're all about a set of competencies, they have the credentials, they have a whole passel of things. But what is it that will help them know that they can go elsewhere, know that they're learning, but that they're curating a set of activities that makes them feel like they're excited and that what they're putting together is what matters to them. Another thought I try to keep with us and with our people is that increasingly, as we've talked about the growth in small business and all of that, increasingly people are actually independent contractors. And many of them want to have their own businesses. And so even now, we have more consultants than we had 20 years ago, right? We have more people coming in and out. And if you think of that into the future, the Uber model will continue. And we'll want that specialist for a little while. We'll actually put up with hiring someone under their terms because we need what they have, rather than forcing them into a staff role and trying to make them fit into a cubicle and come in each day and turn on their computer and be there. More and more people are independent and they'll choose that entrepreneurial life. So what does that do to organization? And what do we need to do to make ourselves attractive enough, tolerant enough, and ready enough to figure out what we align on? And again, it will be on purpose, because even the consultants will want to be engaged in that way. So for our educators, and we're educators too, I have such an interesting institution because we have the university, we have the hospital. We can't let people experiment a lot with healthcare. They need to do things correctly or else something really onerous might happen. But our educators are very challenged these days. The students don't want to sit in class. If they're bored, they just get up and walk out. Think about that though. If they're bored at work, they're going to somehow get up and walk out. So how are they doing that? Turning on Facebook, doing whatever. There's a lot of quit and stay or different activities going on. So there's so much we need to do to really make sure we align with each of these individuals, that we curate an exciting life for them, and that we keep being humble about the fact that they need to choose us every day if we're going to be able to count and rely on them into the future. So just some thoughts.
Okay, first of all, I think I see a lot of young, bright faces and they're very engaged, so thank you very much. I think this is, as per one of those few conferences where there are more young people who are eager to listen and to learn rather than Khalifas and the old people. So let me break it down, Leon, into two things. Engagement, and what is engagement, and then I'll talk a little bit about in terms of what is VUCA and how do we engage. So to me, the differentiating factor between a high-performing winning team and a less successful team is not the capability skill, it is not the tools or the processes which they have, it is the level of engagement. The more engaged the teams are, the higher the probability of them being a high-performing and successful teams. Now, engagement, basically, what does engagement mean? And engagement is not that if I pay you more, you will get more engaged. Engagement goes much beyond. Engagement means that you are engaged from your heart. You are engaged passionately, not only with the organization, but more importantly, your values and your own purpose resonates with the values and the purpose of the organization. And I tell you, for instance, in Bayer, we have a very clear vision. Science for better life. This is what we stand for, and whatever we do, we go back to this vision and say, are we true to our vision, to our purpose? Whatever we do, are we improving the lives of the people that we are interacting? That's the key purpose that we are operating with. So when you have your purpose as an organizational purpose clearly defined, it helps you. That's the starting point for employee engagement. The other thing is your value sets. I work for this organization, and I will continue to work for a longer time only if my personal values resonate with the corporate values. And to the younger people, please, if at any stage you believe your personal values are not resonating with the corporate values, it's a clear indication that you are at the wrong place. You're not going to excel there. You're not going to enjoy there. So think about it. So that to me is very, very critical, very important. Now, when you talk about VUCA, to me, VUCA is the new reality. It's not something that we need to worry about. It is how we work today. This is what the new reality is, and we need to understand and adapt. What happens in VUCA is that because the speed of change and uncertainty is so fast that it creates insecurity, and with insecurity comes confusion. With confusion comes lack of engagement. This is the sequence I believe exists. So as a leader, as an organization, what is important is that we need to create an environment, where we try to reduce the insecurities, and insecurities in terms of the future of the organization, the future of the team, the future of that individual, it has to be reduced. I am not saying it can ever go away fully, but as leaders, we need to do that. And how do we do that? Basically, it is all about how do you communicate. The vision is there, and then as leaders, as a team, how do we communicate? And communicate is not just one-way communication, it is also getting a feedback from your team, from your employee, and have an open and transparent dialogue. I think that's very, very important. Another thing in this VUCA environment, in order to get involved, is also how do you need to be respectful. In uncertain situation, when everybody is under stress, how respectful are you with your team, with yourself, with your organization? That is something very, very, very critical, and I think that that is very important. Last but not least, engagement is not something that you do once in a year. Engagement is something that you do every day. You do with every interaction, you do with every touch point that you have. That is something very, very, very important. Employee engagement is, as a leader, as a CEO, or as a team lead, team engagement is something that I need to do 24/7 at every touch point, at every opportunity that I get. So that's very critical. How do we manage the young generation? I think, Leon, the bigger question is how do we manage diversity? It's not only younger generation, it is how do you manage gender diversity? How do you manage different backgrounds, different nationalities, and different cultures? I think that's the question in VUCA. How do you manage that? For instance, in Bayer, we say, if you have the passion to change, we'll give you a chance to innovate. I think that is the level of engagement where we need to give to our employees, that if they're willing to change, if they're willing to create an environment, we should be open to give them a platform and let them drive the change which is coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. It's very exciting. All morning we've heard about the challenges and very insightful perspectives that have come to front. Employee engagement is an extension of the vision and the traits right at the leadership level within any organization, because there at the helm of affairs is where you are driving the culture, the values, the behaviors, the norms within any organization, and it stands to reason that the leadership is responsible at the end of the day and accountable for ensuring that engagement is one of the top priorities from a business standpoint. It is not just an HR priority, it is a business priority, more so in this world of, as we term it, as VUCA. An interesting piece of trivia is that this concept, this acronym was coined back just post-World War, the Cold World War, when that was ending. And it was actually coined by a US military army college. So its background is from the military services. And then post 9/11, it infiltrated into the corporates, into the corporations and the world as we know it. So it's something that has already been happening. So a lot of my esteemed colleagues in the morning and over here have also pointed out that this is something that we face on a day-to-day basis. This is nothing new. But one of the factors which is really pushing the speed with which organizations have to adapt and to learn, and then also ensure that the sense of purpose is communicated at all levels in the same shared fashion in order to achieve that objective, is the technology, the advent and the pace of technology which now organizations are leveraging. Any organization that does not leverage on technology or enable their people to leverage in order to do business will be seen to be left behind, or they will feel the pinch very soon. Sustainability in terms of their organization performance, sustainability and existence of the very nature of business that we know will no longer be a reality for those organizations. But for us, it is very important to also realize that we need to manage that technology. Hopefully we won't have a Matrix scene or a Terminator scene, but we are going into that direction where you have transactional and routine jobs being passed on to robots, and it's already happening in certain companies in certain parts of the world. But what are the skills that we are sharing and teaching to not only the young generation, but generations who are already in the workforce? So that's very important. When you're creating a sense of purpose, you need to ensure that you are leveraging on the now, not looking at solutions that worked for you yesterday, but are we working on solutions which will work for you today and tomorrow? And that needs a totally different mindset of making sure that we have a technology-enabled certain generations. They want flexibility. They want a sense of adventure. They want the freedom to decide what they want to do in terms of the activities that are there. And you see good organizations already taking lead in terms of not just flexible hours or allowing them to work from home, but also choosing what projects they would like to work on. So that kind of conversation has to start taking place, and it's already starting to take place in leading organizations around the world. The other aspect that I would like to share when you talk about employee engagement is a collaborative environment. When we think of collaboration as business leaders, we say, oh, with our stakeholders or our suppliers or vendors or our customers. But collaboration has to be with our people as well. And again, that becomes a business priority. If we do not have irrespective of age, irrespective of gender, or the diversity that you have also alluded to, that does not matter. That high performance, adding value to the organization, leveraging on an enabling environment, and then focusing that energy towards ensuring that there is continuity within the organization in a collaborative fashion. So get those ideas and ensure that they are translated into something which is commendable, but it is also linked up to not only recognizing, but ensuring that all people within an organization are part and parcel of giving those ideas and performing at a high level in order to ensure sustainability. The third thing that business leaders are constantly grappling with, and they need to relearn that skill on a constant basis. And by the way, for leadership skills, it's no longer about behaviors anymore. It's about the ability to analytically and critically think on your feet and to change the situation, even if it is a negative situation, and then turn it as an opportunity towards your business. That's always happening. Leon, you probably say, yes, this is already happening, but the pace with which they need to turn around certain aspects of the environment externally. All of us are aware of Brexit. All of us are aware of President Trump and the New World Order. You have this move maybe from globalization to nationalization. There's a lot of the jury still out, but let's see where the world goes from this point onwards. So a lot of changes, and how do we engage our people? How do we ensure that they are wanting to work? So we're building their brand, and wherever they go, they are adding value. So these are a few things that I'd like to share in terms of ensuring that there is a collaborative approach towards ensuring employee engagement by the mindfulness of the business leadership that is there, and we work towards a sense of purpose with the speed with which our external environment is working in. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. When I was thinking about this topic, of course, there are two parts to it. One is employee engagement, which I think is universal, time immemorial. It's an important, very important aspect. And the other, of course, is the changing world. Call it VUCA, whatever you will. Now, as far as employee engagement is concerned, I believe it happens at different levels. First of all, it's the engagement with the company or the organization that you're working with. What makes some organizations or employees feel more engaged to some organizations than others? I think it goes to the core of what that organization stands for. I can tell you from my own example, the fact that I've been working with Philips for quite a few years is that when I think about the company and when I think about the mission of the company, which is to improve people's lives through meaningful innovation, that grabs me more than anything else. If you could be working for an organization that is focusing on not just making profits, not just making more money, but really at the core of it, trying to improve people's lives through meaningful innovation, that for me is a big source of engagement. The other, of course, is engagement at every level. I think as leaders, as people who are leading teams, people feel engaged to their organization or to the department or to the work they're doing if they feel valued. I think for a lot of us who've been working for many years, you may forget the specifics of what your bosses said, how they coached you or didn't coach you. I think what really you remember is how they made you feel. Did they make you feel engaged? Did they make you feel as a part of the team? Did you feel valued? Did you feel empowered? Did you feel that you had the flexibility and the empowerment to proactively work in certain areas, to proactively grow your own career? Did you have the options to opt for certain career breaks during your career? These are the kind of things that help to promote engagement. Of course, there are different ways and means of measuring it. One of the things that I've seen is that previously employee engagement surveys used to be the norm of measuring the level of engagement. And Typically, they were done once a year, and in some cases once in 2 years. I can tell you that in our own organization, that's been replaced by a very simple and short survey that's done every 3 months. And the idea is not really to know each and everything about how employees feel, but at the core of it, are they engaged? And to identify areas which are making them feel less engaged. And the reason why they're done every 3 months is that you can't wait for a survey for a year and then get back the results and take another few months to work on it, and you find out that the world has changed around you. Important thing is to really have a pulse on the organization, how they're feeling, and then in a very short span of time, really identify 1 or 2 core areas, and through team dialogues and through understanding how you can make an improvement in that area. So that's one of the things that has happened, and I think that connects it to the topic of VUCA world, or a world which is changing and complex and volatile and ambiguous. This sort of changing world has existed forever. Companies, organizations that have thrived, we've been around for 125 years, is because they've been able to successfully negotiate the changes and think about not how, what they were in the past, but what is required in the world as it's changing. As the world is changing, what is their place in this changing world? Keeping employees motivated in this environment obviously has a different dimension of challenge. I think some of the other speakers have already talked about the importance of having flexibility, the importance of diversity, because I don't think the traditional methods of training and developing people sequentially with set training programs are that effective anymore. Certainly you need the technical and the functional competences, and you need to have certain behavioral capabilities amongst the team members so that the value system of the company is maintained. At the same time, you also need to have an environment where people are encouraged to think in terms of networks, and not just in terms of hierarchy. No one person will have all the answers. If you have a strict traditional hierarchical system, you may not get all the dimensions that you require to solve a certain complex problem. Relationships, networks, sources of information that are now available, all of these things have to come together. And I think if you link it again back to employee engagement, what we found is the more freedom that you give to people to develop themselves beyond the traditional methods, and as far as their own career developments is concerned, rather than waiting for HR or for their line managers to do something for them to move up to the next step, to actually offer a set of opportunities, which is very simple now. We encourage, for example, all our employees to look at our online career center and look for their next career moves wherever that might be, in whichever part of the world. See how that fits in with their own career aspirations. And I can tell you that has resulted in people going to China, to Malaysia, to the Middle East, to Europe, all over the place in pursuit of what is important for them. And with that, they obviously feel a lot more engaged, and other people feel a lot more motivated because they feel that they would also have similar opportunities to grow their careers. These are some of the thoughts that I thought would be useful to share. Thank you.
Thanks. Kamran, we finally get to you.
Kamran Nasir, Chief Executive, JS Global. Thank you very much for having me here. I think the honorable participants, they have already gone into a lot of detail, which is very well covered. I would cite certain important examples from the real world, which I think in today's day and age, where we talk of VUCA, is going to be extremely relevant and important. The example of Kodak, the example of Nokia being out of business, who would have thought in those times, the way they were going, and they were, storming the market by such a huge share, that in today's modern world, they would be nowhere. So a culture of being proactive as opposed to being reactive is something that needs to be inculcated within an organization, because I think that is going to fundamentally form the core of how you are going to run and manage your businesses. Another most important example that comes to my mind is that there is a huge gap in the millennial generation and Generation Y, the generation of the era before 1990s and then post 1990s, kids who are now in their 20s and part of the organization. The gap in the expectation has to be really realized. There were days when the top-down approach would work, but now the time has changed. I think when we talk of engagement, a lot has to be thought about in how to engage with those people, specifically taking in the opinions and buy-in of people who belong to this millennial generation. I personally had one person who was a star salesperson in our team, and the guy is literally about 25, 26 years old. I think for the last 3 years, he has been a consistent top performer. Number two, in terms of his increments, in terms of the bonuses and payouts, he has been ahead of the curve as compared to the others. But the experience that I had, this year around when I was going through the appraisal process, it was that he sat in front of me and he was like, well, I'm not satisfied. Now that was an alarming situation, not being satisfied after achieving so much, after doing so well. So what exactly was he looking for? I think what he hinted towards, though we firmly believed that we are ahead of the curve in terms of bringing technological advancements, hiring the top IT companies to create softwares that would go well with the real time environment that we have today. But his idea was entirely different. He was focused on the fact that the kind of trading tools, the kind of selling tools that I see in today's world, they are entirely different than what I would like to see. I want this change to be much faster and rapid. And he started quoting examples of kids who are using apps in their 15s and their 20s, and how exactly they would like a service to be offered to a certain client. Now this engagement was extremely important. And he came down with an idea, because I represent one of the largest capital markets firm in Pakistan. Then he went on and said, why don't we have a tool through which we should use algorithms for providing sales services to our clients. Now that prompted a change, and it was supposed, as far as I'm concerned, as a business leader, for me, it was something to look at and think about. So we gave him another designation. We have started calling him as a champion of modernization in our organization. Young kid, very dynamic, and now the kind of tool that he is engaged in developing upon, I think that will change the way we approach towards how to deal in the capital markets in Pakistan per se, largely or loosely defined into the financial sector. Another most important example, I think, is the creation of, I don't see Asfar somewhere around, I met him in the morning, this corporate Pakistan group. Now I say that communication is so important that within this CPG, there are, I think, maybe 200 odd members. Whenever there is an issue for all the business leaders, we engage on that platform. We give our opinions. We express our reservations. For example, when Trump came in and the few presidential orders in the first few days, it simply had the tendency to wreck the world. And the way our mindset works, and we as Pakistanis were a little concerned what will happen next to us. So that exchange of communication on that forum with different people with different backgrounds coming in with their thought process, in the process what was happening was that we were learning and acquiring to be able to manage our organizations in a better way. It may be relevant for some organizations, but as a personal development, it is also extremely important. And my entire study of the way you have to deal in this VUCA world is to, by better communicating with your colleagues, with your employees. And today what I've figured out, that what they look forward to is not just satisfaction in terms of their employment careers. I think their professional development and the focus on exposure, because experience does come through age. But I think exposure is how much you are exposed to a certain challenging environment which brings in the best out of you. And then instead of focusing on paying them very high or always competing in terms of how you have to manage their expectations, instead of that, focus on providing them a lifestyle. I think that is going to be a game changer for the generation that we have today that is working for our organizations. And it will be the best way how to engage with them. I understand, that culture has to be inculcated, that transparency, governance, these are all there. Nobody can, forego that at any stage. But reading their mindset and how you have to engage them to be able to, look after what exactly they want to have in their professional career in terms of their growth. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, we were supposed to actually have a Q&A session, but instead of that, I have one more question for the panel, and then you can choose who would like to answer it. Speaker in the previous panel talked about the approach to VUCA. Is it a functional competence or is it a behavioral competence? And it was very clearly a behavioral thing that we need to get our heads around. There was an article the other day in the New York Times about Goldman Sachs and the number of people from Goldman Sachs that have gone into the US government at very, very senior positions or into public service. And people are wondering whether it's some kind of a conspiracy, as usual, the America conspiracy, or do they really have all these brilliant people? And the research showed that they actually look for people at the recruitment level who have a passion for public service, because they know that these people, by the time they're 40, will have made enough money and will want to move on. So they look for people who have a passion for public service. They look for people who with social sciences background as opposed to MBAs, because they feel that those people have a wider perspective. So a company that's looking so far ahead, right at the recruitment level, okay, how can we, at our recruitment level, be looking for those kind of people that's going to take the organization to the future? Which one of you ladies or gentlemen would like to tackle this?
Maybe I can start. And,
Sure.
First of all, Leon, I think we need to understand VUCA, in my view, it is predominantly behavioral, but it also it is also functional also. Because what we, take any science, take anything that we used to do, take IT or data or medicine. What it was 5 years ago, it is not, the facts which were true 5 years ago are not valid today. So there's a lot of new research being done, a lot of new things which are coming. So you have to be very agile as an organization, as an individual, from a functional perspective also. So let's not get into that trap of that VUCA is only behavioral. It is behavioral, yes, but it is functional as well. So you need to balance both of these, otherwise behavior is not going to take you very far in that context. Some of the things that, and let me share an example of Bayer and how we operate. We have a new recruitment program, and as I mentioned earlier, our recruitment branding is, if you have the passion to change, will give you power to innovate. And in our complete recruitment process, we try to identify the traits or the values which are required, which will help us innovate faster and to be more agile and to be more agile, not only in terms of learning, but also more adaptable in terms of the tasks that they are being doing. So I think that is something at the core of the recruitment that we do, and you cannot live without that.
Just reinforcing what has been said, that yes, it is a skill. It's analytical, critical, a thought process that has to be materialized into something which is implementable within an organization. But moving on in terms of who you recruit is also linked to who are you attracting within the organization or to the organization. And it's not just about employer brand, it's also about the organization being positioned in such a way that it shouts out loud that these are the kind of skills and knowledge base that we need within the organization. For example, quoting where AbacusConsulting is, our mandate or our focus or purpose, you may say, is to be the transformation partner of choice. And transformation is not just driven through technology. It is, I believe, predominantly driven through people, and obviously with the structures and processes which complement them. Sending that message out to whoever we recruit and attracting the right talent means that we are looking for people who have celebrated what they learned yesterday, but today they are on a path to learn more so they can make a better tomorrow. And we need to be a step ahead of how things are changing around us globally. For us, for example, a great challenge as we go out, we're now across 3 continents as an organization, and we're focusing on delivering projects across them. For us, unfortunately, our greatest challenge is mobility. And it is very sad that the Pakistani passport or being a Muslim, unfortunately, we do have certain constraints that we have to, but despite those challenges, how you win is through the attitude of individuals who make it work. And that is what we need to attract to our organization. But the positioning has to be very important. Are we sending out the right messages into the market in terms of the talent that we are trying to attract?
I was just going to touch on a couple very quickly of concepts. All of us want to attract the most sparkling recruits that are out there, and this is a very sparkling room, I can tell. But among the things that also we should think about is optimism, because we can all be so drawn down by all the challenge that there is around us. So one of the things that we really try to look for is people who are essentially optimistic. They're going to find a way through, even if they're challenged. And the concept of resilience, which to me has become really a brilliant discovery in coming to Pakistan. This country is very resilient. And in the world, that's a really important concept. It's something that's come up in science. It's a whole area. But if you think about it in terms of how that prepares you, or we prepare our people to be able to deal with the challenges that are ahead, that is a very helpful concept. And thirdly, unfortunately, in the developing world, because people are challenged for the amount of money they have, how much studies they can do, and so forth, there's been a real focus on technical learning, from actuaries to scientists, even not general scientists, but more technical and business degrees and such. So if we're helping to broaden people, and you can't go back to school, we can't all afford to do another degree, what can we do to encourage reading and thinking and discourse inside the organization, so that that same idea of broadening the hiring social science grads and stuff can happen, because we're encouraging people to think in a different way. Because the future will have much more to do with humanities, social science and such, alongside the technical training that everyone will have.
Thank you. Okay, so we've reached the end of this session. I'll quickly recap a few of the key points that were made by this distinguished panel. It's about communicating. Communications, of course, is a two-way process, formally, informally. The values of the organization and the values of the employee, the prospective employee as well, should match. And as Amir rightly said, if you're not engaged with your heart and your mind, and you're not happy, leave. Because it's just not going to work for you, no matter how many hours you put in there. But the values, again, go back to the company's mission and vision. And those are the things that 3 or 4 of the panelists said would attracted them to the organization, and that's what they used to attract other people as well. People need to take ownership of their careers, so in this new world, giving people a little more freedom, a little more responsibility, throwing the problem back at them, saying, come back with the solution. And I think you've a wonderful example from JS Capital on what you can do. Lifestyle changes, give people that opportunity as well. Now, everybody's not going to be able to do this. We're all in our own different stages of our organization life cycles and industry life cycles. So we're going to have to manage this. But again, you need to keep your eyes open, your ears open, and engage with your employees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leon. I request Mr. Badr Khushnut, the co-partner and founder of Bramers, to please join us at the head table. Badr is the former country head of Google in Pakistan. Mr. Asad Jafar. Mr. Amir Iqbal. Mr. Sohail P. Ahmed. Ms. Carol Ariano. Thanks, brother. I will request Mr. Hassan Ali Abdullah of EFU General Insurance to please join us again. Our next panelist is Mr. Kamran Nasir of GS Global. Ms. Fatima Asad-Said of AbacusConsulting. And now, last but not the least, my favorite of whole HR community in Pakistan, our own Leon Menezes. Leon conducted one session in the first edition of HRM Forum in 2003 also. Later he conducted in many years, and today he's again with us in the 12th edition. Thank you, Leon. Please join us for the group photograph. Badr?